Well, good evening and welcome to the New Book of Daniel podcast. My name is Daniel Bobsky. We're doing a Sunday Night Live broadcast here from snowed in, snowed under Boise, Idaho, which is where I tend to hang out the past couple of decades. We have gotten slammed here with snow. I know this storm that came through is now affecting the rest of the nation. And people are getting snow where they don't normally get snow, but we kind of caught the brunt of it. And I think my yard had more than 10 inches of snow just in a couple of days. I kept true to my word. I didn't touch a snow shovel. I did touch my electric snow shovel, which I just have to push. I don't have to lift up any snow. Just push it and it throws the snow forward. And then I do have a snowblower, and I finally for the second time, got to use it. Snow was thick, like I said, 10 inches, very, very wet. So helped out some of the neighbors too. It was kind of fun. Enjoyed doing that. Didn't have to break my back to help my neighbors this year. Hey, so tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that are in the news and look at them from a Patriot perspective, which you're probably not going to hear on national TV and those kind of places. But so here's my 5 topics for this episode. Vernon Jones used to be a Democrat, has left the Democrat Party. He has mocked Nancy Pelosi for her, quote, meltdown that she had after Trump was acquitted. We'll talk a little bit about that. Joe Biden, you may recall, said that anybody who was going to be disrespectful on his team were going to get fired immediately on the spot. No ifs, ands, or buts. They were going to get fired. Well, Joe lied, and the media doesn't care. We'll take a look at the specific situation. And then my last live stream, I talked about Nikki Haley, who I think is going to be a danger to the Republican Party. And yesterday, she proved herself accurate. She came out and said that, well, we'll talk about what she has to say, but I predicted that Nikki Haley has slammed Trump and his supporters. Hey, Amelia, in Dallas, you guys are getting some snow down there. I saw 3 to 5 inches of snow, I think is what I saw predicted for Dallas, which is like pretty rare, my understanding. But, it's snow and it happens and it's just like frozen rain. Unfortunately, it's heavy and it stays and doesn't wash away right away. And lastly, 2 more things to talk about. Kamala Harris. So people have believed that that Trump should have been, quote, convicted of this impeachment. My question is, what if that was true? If anybody believes that, what should they be believing about Kamala Harris? We'll take a look at some of the things that she has said the past couple of years. And then we're going to lastly take a look at Instagram is now monitoring private messages, their DMs, their direct messages, for, quote, hate speech. And we'll take a look at what that is happening, what's happening there, and the implications thereof. Let's first start off by talking about this Nancy Pelosi meltdown. There was a press conference going on, and you're going to have to pardon my little bit of a joke here, but you had these guys standing up there from the defense, the prosecution team, the House managers, and Eric Swalwell was there, and they're all wearing masks. And the standing joke is they weren't afraid of COVID. They just knew they were standing next to Eric Swalwell. And I'll let you go back and look at the history of him to find out why they might have been wearing masks. But Nancy Pelosi came out and she basically interrupted their press conference and she threw a little temper tantrum. And she was talking about how he was acquitted and this is what she said. The liberal media, that's what Jones said. Pelosi accused Republican senators of not being able to get another job, which is why she claimed they wouldn't convict Trump. Censure, which is what I guess the turtle came out and talked about, is a slap in the face of the Constitution. It lets everybody off the hook. Pelosi, think about what you said. Let me continue what she was saying. She goes, oh, these cowardly senators who couldn't face up to what the president did and what was at stake for our country and are now going to have a chance to give a little slap on the wrist. And what she was referring to And I'm by the way, I'm quoting an article at MediaRightNews.com. Again, you're not going to hear this on your local evening broadcasts, but she talks about Charles Rangel, and she said, we censure people for using stationery for the wrong purpose. In other words, this is how insignificant a censure is, and we censured basically Charlie Rangel, former representative from New York. But what she kind of glossed over was that Charlie Rangel was censured and should have been kicked out of Congress for what he did. He was found guilty by the ethics panel, and I have to say I have zero respect for the ethics committee in the House, because all they do is slap people on the wrist, if that. That is one place in the Constitution where I think they messed up. They expected people to police themselves. They believed that if somebody was acting unethically, that the voters would vote them out. I think our founders had a little bit too much faith in the people to do the right thing, and the depravity of man to lie and cheat and steal and get around things and spin things. John Adams said it best: our Constitution is for a religious and moral people, wholly unsuitable to the government of any other. So when you don't have a religious and moral people, the government's not going to work well. You have to have some ethics involved. Anyways, I digress. Charles Rangel was found guilty by the ethics panel of 11 counts of violating ethics rules, including charges that he improperly solicited millions of dollars from corporate offices and lobbyists for the Charles B. Rangel Center for Public Service at City College of New York. He failed to disclose hundreds of thousands of dollars of income. He maintained a rent-stabilized apartment as a campaign office in the Harlem apartment building and failed to pay income taxes on a place that he had in the Dominican Republic. Charles Rangel should have been pushed out of Congress, and he was censured. And Nancy Pelosi, referring to that, said he used the wrong stationery. He used stationery for the wrong purpose. He was using his office in the Congress as a representative and using his letterhead to get things done illegally. He wasn't just using stationery for the wrong purpose. He was lying and cheating and basically calling in money. Say, hey, you give me money here, we'll do this. And this is just how the swamp operates. And yet Charles Rangel just gets a censure. She says, we don't censure, this is Pelosi again, she says, we don't censure people for inciting insurrection that kills people at the Capitol. Which leads me to something else. And I'm kind of kicking myself on this because Matt Walsh beat me to it. And only because I let it lie. I should have picked it up last week. I was doing some research on the narrative that this riot, this insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th caused, I started off with 5 deaths, and now I think it's up to 7, depending on who you're talking to. I did some research into that. One person, the woman inside who was climbing through the window who got shot. Every other death that they're claiming happened because of the quote-unquote riots. I will call them Marxist-led insurrection because that's what it was, a Marxist-led insurrection that goaded and pulled the patriots into it because they were the Marxists were dressed like patriots, and everybody thought, oh, we'll just go with the flow here. We have video of this. This is not just a conjecture on my part. But one person dies getting shot. The other people all died on that day, but not because of what happened at the Capitol. Even the lady who they say got trampled, there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence that she was crushed. There's no bruising. There's evidence that she died of other causes. She had medical issues. One guy died of a stroke, totally unrelated to the events of the Capitol on that day. One guy died of a heart attack, totally unrelated. The cop, Sicknick, he, driving home from the Capitol, calls his brother The narrative is he got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher. Guess what? He never told his brother he got hit in the head with a fire extinguisher. Didn't. Went back to his office, went back to the police office, the police department, did some work, whatever. Happened to die the next day. The dude did not die from a fire extinguisher. That is a narrative story. They got into the narrative and everybody just repeats it thinking it's true. When you look at this narrative of deaths, we don't censure people for inciting insurrection that kills people in the Capitol. The insurrection didn't kill people. A police officer working for the government killed somebody and didn't have to. Anyways, Nancy Pelosi threw a conniption fit. She's pissed. They went out and they tried to say, hey, let's this is my thinking. Let's impeach Trump twice. He'll be the only president to be impeached twice. And of course, they didn't get the conviction. So now, really, we just spin that back around and say Nancy Pelosi is the only speaker to put forth 2 impeachments and have both of them fail. So you could look at it that way too. Nancy, sorry, you need to go. Speaking of the White House and the government, we have this guy named Joe Biden. Let's move on to our next story. Joe Biden promised, there's audio, video on this, that he would fire anybody in his administration who was caught being disrespectful. Maybe you remember that. Well, there's this deputy press secretary called TJ Ducklow. And this guy is a piece of work. I went back and watched an interview of him on Bret Baier's show. This was a tweet that was a video tweet. And he was so rude, so condescending to Bret Baier. Amazing. I was incredulous just watching it. How can you? And the guy he's 32 now. At the time he was 31, being this cocky, condescending SOB. Pardon my, well, you know what that means. So anyways, he's having an affair with a reporter. And somebody from Politico finds out about it and decides to write a story. This is an ethics violation. Somebody from the press corps, who's the deputy press secretary, TJ Ducklow, who's having an affair with a reporter, conflict of interest. And so another reporter decides to write about it. And Ducklow realizes, oh, my job's on the line. And he threatens this Politico reporter. He says that he was going to destroy her. And this is not alleged, by the way. He has come out and apologized for the things that he said. So this isn't alleged anymore. So anyways, Joe Biden said anybody caught being disrespectful is going to get fired. This Ducklow guy very much disrespected her, talked to her in a way that no man should talk to a woman at all, threatens to destroy her. And so the Politico folks end up calling the press department there at the White House, and they talk to a couple levels up from Ducklow. And what happens, this finally gets out. Nothing's happening. You'd think now, Joe says you're going to get fired on the spot, but Ducklow goes, and he decides to issue an apology, and he gets suspended for a week. TJ Ducklow, this is Orange Lady Bad. I can't even say her name. Don't want to say her name. She's the gal who she circles back a lot. I know her name is Jen Psaki. So anyways, she tweets out the other day, TJ Ducklow has apologized to the reporter with whom he had a heated conversation about his personal life. He's the first to acknowledge this is not the standard of behavior set out by the president. In addition to his initial apology, he sent the reporter a personal note expressing his profound regret. Joe Biden lied to us. He said that he was going to fire people who did this. Didn't fire him. Person gets a week-long suspension. Well, then that starts getting in the news, and people start throwing a hoorah. And then yesterday, Mr. Ducklow has resigned. Bye-bye. Great thing. Finally realized you can't talk to women like that. And maybe he'll learn a little bit of a humility lesson. Like I said, you go back and watch his interview with Brett Baer, and it is unbelievably rude and condescending. Would not answer Brett's question, kept being very condescending to Brett as Brett kept trying to ask the question again. Spin master extraordinaire, needs to go. All right. Story number 3, Nikki Haley. And I talked about this in my last podcast, my last broadcast here. I said Nikki Haley is a danger to the Republican Party. She's basically an establishment Republican who believes that now Trump wasn't the guy for the job. And she came out this past weekend with an interview, and she said, we have to acknowledge that he let us down, talking about Trump. He went down a path he shouldn't have, and we shouldn't have followed him. We shouldn't have listened to him, and we can't let that happen ever again. Nikki, are you running for the Democrat presidency for 2024? Because that doesn't sound like a Republican person talking. I think Trump had every right to confront the, I'm on YouTube right now, and they had this little method where you upload a video, and even the live stuff, their process, they can auto translate into, when you see the stuff at the bottom of the screen, this is their system adding the words for the closed captioning. So they've got voice to text translators on all their videos. They can tell what I say. So I got to be careful not to use the F word, the FRAUD word with the word election in front of it. Or this video probably get taken down, and you never know, they might take down all my videos. Speaking of which, let me I'm full of asides tonight. It is a crazy night. I am going to be opening a channel on Clout Hub, so take note of that. If you're not on Clout Hub, you might want to go there. I'm going to be opening a channel over there. I'm also on Rumble. I have a Rumble account, so if you've been following me on YouTube on these podcast videos, and you somehow find out one day that I'm not around on YouTube anymore, you will be able to find me on Rumble and also over on Clout Hub. So probably going to be making a morph now that I'm no longer on Twitter. You know, my badge of honor, I was kicked off of Twitter. Facebook not far. We'll talk about that in a second. Anyways, go follow me over on Clout Hub. It's just New Book of Daniel, by the way. It's New Book of Daniel on all the platforms. If you go onto a media platform and you search for New Book of Daniel, that's the easiest way to find me. I don't usually go under Daniel Bobinski because that is my business name, and I have some very left-wing clients, and they don't know what I do in a New Book of Daniel, and that's okay. I don't care. If they find out and they fire me, that's okay. Cancel culture, God provides. But don't have to broadcast that out there in the major world. So Daniel Bobinski, rarely you'll see me out there. And usually it's just New Book of Daniel as my political stuff and the stuff that I write about regarding issues of the day. Anyways, and speaking of which, if you do want some coaching and some training along the lines of emotional intelligence, look me up. We've been doing that for 30 years. I keep digressing tonight. Wow. President Trump, I believe, had every right to challenge this ballot manipulation that we saw happening. In fact, the Supreme Court is now going to be looking at Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia. A little late, but they're doing it. And I had this conversation earlier today with somebody. Wouldn't it be interesting if the Supreme Court found that there was sufficient ballot manipulation in those 3 states to turn the election back to where the votes actually didn't go to the current occupant of the White House, and Donald J. Trump is actually still the president of the United States? What if the court did that? What would happen? That's a great question. It's never happened. It would create a constitutional crisis, would it not? And yet, it's a very real possibility. Something to think about. As far as Nikki Haley goes, I think she should consider joining the Democrat Party. Because the other side of that conversation is that the Republican Party really needs some help defining what it stands for and who it is. Because we have establishment Republicans, Jeb Bush, Yertle the Turtle, all the people who've been there for, Lindsey Graham, they call themselves Republicans. And then you've got people who believe in the Constitution and ruling according to the rule of law and standing up for the principles that made America great, which Donald Trump was doing. You don't see a Trump flag hanging in front of my house. You don't ever see me waving a Trump flag. Donald Trump was popular, I believe, because like Reagan, he made people feel good about being Americans. There's globalists out there who don't want people feeling good about being Americans, and that's why they smeared Donald Trump at every turn. Every turn. Every lie they could come up with. I just posted on my personal Facebook page today a dozen pictures of Donald Trump with various black leaders. And yet, what did we hear for the past 4 years? Donald Trump's a racist. Donald Trump's a racist. And then he's just taking those pictures to hide his racism. Based on what evidence would somebody say that? There is such a smear campaign against us now, too. Anybody who wants to stand up for the Constitution. If you call yourself a patriot, that's not that's analogous to being a terrorist. Count me in for being a patriot, not a terrorist. I'm a patriot. But that's what they're saying. And they're trying to smear anybody who wants to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the principles upon which America was founded. If we just, as patriots, stand by and go, well, we'll wait till 2022 and see if we can get the House back, and no, it's going to be too late. Every day we got to be letting our voices be heard. We can't be afraid of a cancel culture. We got to say what needs to be said, and eventually we will morph over to platforms like CloutHub, like Gab. You can find me on Gab, by the way. New book of Daniel, where they own their own platforms and Amazon doesn't own the servers. That's going to be available for us. That's where we're going to end up going in order to have our conversations. This is the town square. I'm talking with you right now as if I were sitting in the town square having my little soapbox moment. And thank you for listening. I appreciate it. But you have people out there who don't want us to have this conversation, and so they cancel us out. They can't, they're like without warning. Twitter, my account, just gone. Bam, everything's gone. So we have people who, I'm going to move on to my fourth story here. We have people who wanted to convict Donald Trump of inciting violence. All right. Kamala Harris. What do we do with her then? Because Parker Beauregard over at Blue State Conservative has a great piece. I recommend you go take a look at it. He outlines these at least four times in his column here, that Harris basically condoned or encouraged or maybe even incited violence herself. You might recall last summer, she was a guest on the Stephen Colbert talk show. Used to be called a late night comedy. It's just a late night Republican bashing, and patriot bashing and Christian bashing. But she was a guest on there, and Colbert is talking about all of the riots and all of the violence, and he's talking about he's calling them protests, but they're obviously not just people carrying placards around, chanting "Ho, hey, hey, ho, ho, Trump has got to go." These were people who were burning. I mean, what we had. So he says these riots we've not heard about them in the news. We've not heard about them. So she says, "Oh no, that's the right thing. They're not going to stop. This is a movement. Everyone beware. They're not going to stop, nor should they stop. And they're going to continue to the election, and they're going to continue after, and they should continue after the election." This is Kamala Harris. everyone beware. Can you imagine if Donald Trump said those words? He'd have been impeached on the spot. How can this be okay for her, but not for anyone else who has a R after their name or is a conservative in any way, shape, or form? Then maybe you remember the Breonna Taylor situation. Here, these cops show up. There's some gunfire exchange. She ends up, it's an unintentional shooting. She ends up dying. And there's a massive uprising and riots in Louisville. She described that as brilliant, that the uprising was, quote, brilliant, an essential component of real democracy. Oh, really? All the violence, stores burned, people injured, an essential component of real democracy. During January 6th, the evening of January 6th, Donald Trump denounces all the violence at the Capitol that day. The same night. Can you imagine if he said this is a mark of democracy? What about George Floyd? Remember him? Some cop is arresting him because he was shuffling phony money around. He had counterfeit money. He gets arrested. Turns out he's full of fentanyl. He probably would have died by himself anyways, even if he wasn't arrested. That came out in the autopsy. One of the side effects of a fentanyl overdose is your lungs fill up with fluid and you drown. So he's fighting back. The cops asked him, "Are you on anything?" He says no. He lies to the cops. Doesn't want to get in trouble. If he had told them, "Yep, I took some fentanyl," they might have known that one of the side effects of fentanyl would be inability to breathe. And because of lungs filling up. This guy's being belligerent. I've talked to cops who say this, that perps do this all the time. They push back and I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And he's not wanting to get in the car. There's 3 cops trying to get him to get in the cop car. He will not go. They try the other door, go on the other side. So there's more room off and ends up on the street. One cop to hold him down. This was an approved technique by the police to put your knee on somebody's neck. And he's going, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," which is what they hear all the time. Standard line. Fact is, he's on fentanyl and he's drowning because he's ODing on fentanyl. And that's why the people who were the cops all got let off. They were all arrested for attempted murder or murder. And they all got let off. Why? Because he committed suicide from taking so much fentanyl. Inadvertent suicide, perhaps. But he died from the fentanyl, not because the cops kneeled on his neck until he couldn't breathe. That's the situation. And so here's all these riots in Minnesota. 2 deaths from those riots. $500 million in property damage. The place looked like a war zone in Bosnia. And what's Kamala doing? Kamala Harris is going, "If you're able to chip in now to the Freedom Fund to help post bail for these protesting on the ground in Minnesota, you're able to let's chip in." Yeah. And she's bailing these people out who are causing all the violence. After they're getting arrested, as soon as they're arrested for all the violence, Kamala Harris is raising up money to get them bailed out of. In other words, keep protesting, we'll bail you out. Then there's Kamala Harris on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Ellen poses the question to Kamala Harris if she'd prefer to be alone in an elevator with either President Trump, Vice President Pence, or then Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Which one would she prefer to be alone in an elevator with? And her response, without batting an eye, does one of us have to come out alive? Can you imagine if Trump had said that? Do they have to come out alive? After if someone said to Trump, "Hey, would you like to meet with Pelosi? Would you rather be in an elevator alone with Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, or Adam Schiff?" Who would you? If he said, "Would they have to come out alive?" I mean, if he'd said that, same thing. He'd be impeached, inciting violence. Blah 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 blah. So everybody who's shouting that Trump needed to be convicted of inciting violence, clearly he didn't. Needs to go back and take a look at Kamala and say, what should we do with her? Great question. All right, let me wrap up my evening tonight, and I'm going to talk about hate speech. Now, I remember watching Bill Clinton when they first started talking about hate crimes and hate crime legislation, and I just shook my head. This is not going to end well, because who defines hate? And all that hate crime legislation now is do you have hate when you commit the crime? And if so, then the punishment is doubled. So if you shoot somebody for breaking into your house, it's the castle doctrine, right? In some states. Other states, not so much. You could get charged with murder. But if somebody breaks into your house and you've been having an argument with them and they're threatening you, and you have previously stated that you hate the person, and you end up shooting him in self-defense, they might charge you with a hate crime. And now you get double the punishment because you killed the man in hate. The question is, who defines hate? How does that come down? Well, now you got people getting kicked off of the town square, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. You get kicked off for hate speech. And now this is in the news here. Neonettle.com. Instagram now monitoring private messages for hate speech, so they can ban people. Instagram, by the way, is owned by Facebook. If you break the rules, even in a DM, even in a direct message, a private message, you are going to get nailed for hate speech. Facebook-owned Instagram announced this week it's now monitoring private messages and will permanently ban people found to be using hate speech. Unreal. Today we're announcing we'll take tougher action when we become aware of people breaking our rules in DMs. Currently, when someone sends DMs that break our rules, we prohibit that person from sending any more messages for a set period of time. Now, if someone continues violating messages, we will disable their account. We'll also disable new accounts created to get around our messaging restrictions. So if they disable your account and you go to open a new account, and they find out that it's you, they'll just disable it even if you don't have hate speech. Sorry, you can't be on our platform. Even if you're trying to turn over a new leaf and start afresh. Sorry. I got that warning on Twitter. This is kind of funny. Listen to this. Listen to this. I had my political account, New Book of Daniel, and then I had a business account from my company, for my coaching, which I didn't use too much. In fact, I don't think I've used it in close to a year because I spend most of my time not talking about political things. But they kicked me off my platform for my New Book of Daniel. And they also canceled my business account and accused me of trying to open the business account to get around being kicked off from the political account, even though I'd had the business account for years. And they accused me of trying to circumvent their system. These people don't think. They're morons. They're idiots. And they're Marxists. Oh, was I redundant there? Sorry. Silicon Valley oligarchs are making it clear that they wish to silence anyone with whom they disagree on their platforms. Twitter, by the way, shut down the Project Veritas accounts, both Project Veritas Twitter account and the James O'Keefe account, for rules against posting private information. Really? I don't know, when you have somebody on tape and they're talking about things that is public information and you share that videotape, you're not sharing private information. They're talking about public information. You would think that would be considered logical, but no, they just decide, well, that's private information. Shouldn't be sharing that. This is the kicker, though. This decision by Twitter comes after Project Veritas is reporting on Facebook about Facebook President Guy Rosen, saying that the big tech platform freezes, using algorithms, comments that were hate speech, listen to this, may be. Not that hate speech has occurred. They will freeze comments if they think hate speech is going to occur on the comment. Quote, we have a system that is able to freeze commenting on threads in cases where our systems are detecting that there may be a thread that has hate speech or violence. Minority Report, accusing somebody of a crime before the crime is committed. And it's happening there. Again, you want to be careful here what you're saying, because it might be considered hate speech and you might get frozen or even kicked off. I am glad to be moving over to CloutHub and Gab. Gab owns their own servers. They own their own system. And I'm really finding Gab to be a nice place. MeWe, a little bit confusing, and some aspects of it a little bit too. The notifications is kind of hard to turn them off. I am on MeWe, by the way. You can track me there as well. Gab, MeWe for other platforms, but from what I can tell, CloutHub looks like to be a future for being able to share things without fear of getting kicked off because you say the wrong phrase. You know, like election F word instead of ballot manipulation, whatever. Now let me finish up with just this little bit also from shutting people down. In an announcement on February 8th, Facebook claims it is expanding our efforts to remove false claims about COVID-19 vaccines and vaccines in general during this pandemic. We will begin enforcing this policy immediately, with a particular focus on pages, groups, and accounts that violate these rules, and will continue to expand our enforcement over the coming weeks. Groups, pages, and accounts on Facebook and Instagram that repeatedly share these debunked claims may be removed altogether, quote unquote, from Facebook. So if you start posting things about injections, medical injections, and who cares if it's true? Who cares if it's a study that's showing peer-reviewed journal stuff with data? If it disagrees with Facebook's take on things, then they will just remove you. They'll either shut you down or remove you from the platform altogether. This happened to me last summer. I wrote an article on face masks, and I cited peer-reviewed journals, randomized controlled trials with verifiable outcomes that showed a result on mask wearing where there was no statistical difference either way, whether you wore one or not. This wasn't my conjecture. I'm simply quoting the extant data out there, peer-reviewed, randomized controlled trials with verifiable outcome. In other words, they didn't just say, do you have the sniffles? They actually did a medical test to find out if the virus transferred from one person to another. And Facebook had over 400,000 shares on Facebook, and Facebook flagged it for false information. There's no false information in there, and yet they say, well, this research over here shows that masks are effective, so everything you posted is false. That's not how science works. Science doesn't work that way. Someone does a study, and they list how they do the study, and so that you can replicate the study to try to get the results yourself. I mean, I've got an undergrad, a master's, and all my doctoral work is done for my PhD, and we studied study after study after study about how to evaluate and how you need to write your doctoral dissertation so that somebody can duplicate your efforts. You explain the processes step by step. When you write a published journal article, same thing, everything step by step. Here's what I did. Here's what my findings were. Here's the results, so that now you If you want to duplicate it, you can do the same steps to find out if what this person just published is the same thing. That's how it works. That's how science is supposed to work. So there's extant data out there, 8 or 9 different, I think 11 different studies, all randomized controlled trials with verifiable outcomes, no statistical difference between a face diaper and no face diaper. None. And yet, because one study comes out and says, oh, we did this study and we found that they do reduce. And so therefore, this is all false? No, that's not how it works. And yet that's exactly what Facebook and Instagram are doing, and Twitter, same thing. If what you say doesn't agree with what the World Health Organization is promulgating, whatever they say is law, even if it's wrong. Even if we have studies after study after study after study showing something different, if the World Health Organization disagrees, you can get yourself removed because they will say that what you're publishing is debunked. Think about that. Think about that. That's what's happening here. Go back and read the book 1984. It's supposed to be a novel and a warning, not a guidebook. And yet that's what's happening. Anyways, I thank you for tuning in. We've been on the air for 41 minutes talking about things that you're not going to see on the nightly news, that's for sure. Vernon Jones from Georgia was a Democrat representative, switched to Republican Party, black gentleman, which really ticks off the narrative because they don't like that when a black Democrat decides to become a Republican. And he totally mocked Pelosi for this meltdown. We covered Joe Biden lying to us about firing people who disrespect others. Media doesn't care about that either. And then we talked about Nikki Haley. As I predicted, she's not exactly a Republican. We need to have a conversation in this country. I started talking about it, but we need to have a conversation about what it means to be a Republican. What is the future of the Republican Party? It's why I left the Republican Party. I had to go back and end up re-registering as a Republican so that I could vote in the primaries in my state. But after George W. Bush raked Americans over the coal with the Patriot Act and took away our rights and lied to us about Iraq, I decided, you know what? I am done with the R's. You guys are a bunch of globalists. And I left and became an independent. And turns out you can't vote in the Republican primary if you're an independent. So the only reason I'm a Republican is so I can vote. I kind of fashioned myself as a Christian libertarian, actually. I do not believe in all the left-wing lunacy of the Libertarian Party. I'm definitely not for abortion. I'm definitely not for other things that are not in alignment with Scripture, because I believe that the moral law, the natural law, and the moral law set forth in Scripture is the basis for civil law. And so did our founders. And so I fancy myself a Christian libertarian in the classical libertarian sense of the word, not the modern left-wing libertarian sense of the word. Anyways, we still need to talk about what it means to be a Republican in this country and whether in the future of it. And then Kamala Harris, what are we going to do with her comments if Trump should have been convicted? Well, come on, leftists, you tell me. What do we do with Kamala's comments? And then, of course, the hate speech and who defines hate speech. That's pretty crazy. How do you define what hate speech is? And they don't tell you. They just decide, oh, that's hate speech. That's how I got kicked off of Twitter. So they decided arbitrarily something I said was hate speech. I'm gone. So, all right. This is Daniel Bobinski with the New Book of Daniel. I thank you for tuning in. If you want to follow me, you can also go to uncoverdc.com. Check out my columns over there. You can check me out on MeWe. You can check me out on Gab. I am still on Facebook with the New Book of Daniel. You can check me out over on CloudHub in the coming. I actually have a CloudHub account. You can track me down over there, and I'll have my own channel here in the next couple of weeks. And then Gab, I think I said as well. So, what am I missing? I'm missing something. Yeah, we'll be doing another live stream probably on Tuesday night. So tune in for that. And until then, this is Daniel Bobinski with the New Book of Daniel. And I thank you very much for listening. Stay warm, stay safe. The roads are crazy in some parts of the country. But between now and then, on Tuesday night, we hope you be blessed. We'll catch you later. Bye now.